Have you ever experienced that moment when everything around you seems strangely familiar, as if the scene were repeating itself exactly the same way? You enter a place, hear a phrase, feel the atmosphere, and suddenly that disconcerting certainty comes over you. This has happened before. It's not just a vague impression. It's a strong, almost physical conviction. A shiver runs through your body, your heart races slightly, and for a few seconds reality seems to falter. Have you ever experienced this? Déjà vu is one of the most intriguing experiences of the human mind precisely because it happens without warning. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. It could be during a banal conversation, walking down the street, or experiencing something completely new. Yet the brain insists that it's nothing new. It's as if the mind is one step ahead of time, or perhaps completely out of sync with it. The most disturbing thing is that this feeling isn't accompanied by a clear memory. You don't know when it might have happened before or where or with whom. You only know that, somehow, it has already been experienced. And this certainty is so intense that it defies logic. After all, how can something seem so real if, rationally, you know it's impossible? Stay with me until the end because what you're about to discover may surprise you more than you imagine. For a long time, déjà vu was treated as something mystical, spiritual, or even supernatural. Some people believed it was a glimpse of the future, a glitch in reality, or even a memory of past lives. But, with advances in neuroscience, science has begun to look at this strange brain phenomenon more closely, and the more it is investigated, the more complex the answer seems to become. Today, researchers know that déjà vu is deeply linked to how memory works, how the brain interprets the present, and even the mind's ability to predict what will happen next. Yes, your brain makes predictions all the time even without you realizing it. It anticipates scenarios, recognizes patterns, and tries to save energy by taking mental shortcuts. And that's exactly where things can go wrong. Some scientists argue that déjà vu is a simple memory error, a kind of duplicate file created by the brain. Others believe it happens when a brain prediction fails by milliseconds, making the present seem like the past. The most fascinating thing is that none of these explanations on its own can fully answer why déjà vu is so real, so convincing, and so universal. Almost everyone has experienced this sensation at least once in their life. And here's the most unsettling point. Déjà vu isn't just a harmless curiosity. It reveals something profound about how the brain constructs reality. It shows that what we feel as real isn't just what happens outside of us, but the result of invisible, silent, and automatic processes happening inside our minds. Processes that can fail, or perhaps work just too well. While you watch this video, your brain is interpreting every word, every sound, and every image, comparing everything to past experiences, creating expectations, and trying to predict what comes next. And sometimes, when these systems intersect unexpectedly, that strange feeling of absolute familiarity is born. A feeling that doesn't ask permission, doesn't explain its reasons, and simply imposes itself. What makes déjà vu seem so convincing? Why does it happen more often at some times than others? And ultimately, are we talking about a brain error, or a prediction that almost came true? As we go along, you'll realize that this seemingly simple experience hides one of the deepest mysteries of the human mind, and perhaps changes the way you see your own perception of reality. And that's precisely why this topic is so thought-provoking. Because when we talk about déjà vu, we're not just talking about a curious brain phenomenon, but something that directly touches the human experience. Those who have felt it know, it's impossible to ignore. The sensation echoes in the mind as if the brain is trying to tell us something, even if we don't know exactly what. If this topic resonates with you, if at some point in your life you've stopped and thought, this isn't normal, but it's real, I'd love to know. Leave a comment below describing your experience, what you felt at that moment, or even what you believe when this happens. Your experience can help others understand that they are not alone in this strange feeling. As you reflect on this, also consider how much content like this needs interaction to continue existing. When you like a video like this, it's not just an automatic click. It's a sign that this kind of deep, curious, and scientific conversation deserves to continue appearing, deserves to reach more people who also wonder how the mind works and why the brain sometimes seems to deceive us. This simple gesture helps the video reach further, break the silence, and spark questions in those who may never have stopped to think about it. And if you feel that this type of content resonates with you, if you enjoy exploring the mysteries of the human brain, memory, and perception of reality, consider subscribing to the channel. Not as an obligation but as an invitation. By subscribing, you show that you want to continue this journey, that you want to delve deeper into these strange phenomena that are part of who we are. Your presence here strengthens this curious, restless community, open to questioning the obvious. Every comment, Every subscription is a way of saying, this matters. It matters to talk about science in an accessible way, it matters to look at the human mind with curiosity and respect, it matters to create a space where complex questions can be asked without easy answers. And all of this only makes sense because you are there, on the other side of the screen, reflecting along with us. Now, while this idea is still fresh in your mind, let's continue moving forward. Because understanding déjà vu requires going beyond the initial sensation and beginning to explore what really happens inside the brain when the present, the past, and the anticipation of the future seem to become confused. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because to understand what déjà vu truly is, it's necessary to separate two things that almost always get mixed up: the sensation you experience in your body and the explanation your brain tries to give afterward. Déjà vu is not an image of the future, it's not a hidden memory, and it's not a supernatural sign. From a scientific point of view, it's defined as an intense and momentary feeling of familiarity in the face of a situation that is objectively new. And this detail changes everything. When déjà vu happens, the brain isn't saying, this has already happened exactly like this. It's saying something more subtle and at the same time more unsettling: this seems familiar. The sensation arises before rational explanation, before you can organize your thoughts, search for memories, or compare facts. It's as if the brain issues an immediate verdict without presenting evidence. And that's precisely what makes this experience seem so real. Science has been studying déjà vu for decades because it touches on a sensitive point in the human mind: the confidence we have in our own perception. Neuroscientists and psychologists know that the brain doesn't record reality like a camera. It interprets, organizes, simplifies, and reconstructs everything all the time. Déjà vu arises when this normally efficient system creates a short circuit between perception and memory. It's not a gross glitch, but a small mismatch between processes that usually work in perfect synchrony. To understand this, it's important to remember that memory isn't a static file stored in a drawer. It's alive, dynamic, and deeply connected to the emotions, decisions, and mindset with which you experience each moment. The brain is constantly comparing the present with past experiences, searching for patterns, anticipating outcomes, and trying to predict what comes next. This mechanism is essential for survival, learning, and transformation throughout life. The problem is that sometimes this system works too fast. In déjà vu, the brain recognizes elements of the environment: a light, a sound, a smell, a spatial arrangement, and activates the sensation of familiarity even before identifying the origin of that impression. It's as if the label known were stuck on the experience without the content having been checked. When the conscious mind tries to access the corresponding memory and finds nothing, strangeness arises. The sensation remains, but the explanation doesn't come. And it is in this void that the mystery is born. This phenomenon doesn't mean you have a hidden or repressed memory. It means that the brain behind the scenes works with shortcuts. It prefers speed to absolute precision. In almost all situations this works very well. But déjà vu is the moment when this shortcut becomes visible. It's like seeing the gears turning behind the conscious experience. And when that happens, the feeling is disconcerting because it reminds us that the reality we live in is, to a large extent, an internal construct. Studies show that déjà vu is more common in young, curious people who are exposed to new experiences, different environments, and varied stimuli. This is no coincidence. A brain in constant learning mode makes more connections, recognizes more patterns, and operates at a high level of anticipation. The more the brain tries to predict the world, the greater the chance of occasionally confusing prediction with memory. Déjà vu can be seen, in this sense, as a side effect of an active, attentive, and highly adaptable brain. There is also a significant emotional impact to this experience. Déjà vu affects our sense of control. It creates the impression that something has escaped logic, that there is a hidden truth behind conscious perception. And this provokes profound questions about decisions, free will, and even about how much we really understand ourselves. It's no wonder that so many cultures throughout history have tried to explain déjà vu in mystical or spiritual ways. When science didn't yet have the tools to investigate the brain, the mystery seemed greater than reason. But the fact that science studies déjà vu doesn't make it any less fascinating. On the contrary, knowing that it arises from real, measurable, and complex neural processes only reinforces how impressive the workings of the human mind are. Déjà vu reveals that our experience of the present is not just what is happening now, but the result of silent comparisons between past, present, and immediate future. It shows that perception is not passive. It is active, interpretive, and sometimes flawed. This flaw, however, is not a simple mistake. It is a direct consequence of the brain's sophistication. A system capable of making quick decisions, recognizing subtle patterns, and anticipating scenarios inevitably runs the risk of, on rare occasions, becoming confused. Déjà vu is that instant when the mechanism appears. A quick glimpse of the complexity that underpins everything we call reality. And perhaps the most intriguing aspect is realizing that, during déjà vu, we are not deceived by something external but by ourselves. By our own minds trying to do what they have always done: understand, predict, and organize the world. This realization changes not only how we view the phenomenon, but also the very trust we place in our daily perception. If the brain can create such a powerful sensation without a corresponding memory, what else might it be interpreting without us realizing it? This questioning opens up space for even deeper reflections on consciousness, identity, and how we construct meaning throughout life. Déjà vu ceases to be merely a curious event and becomes a portal to understanding the limits and capabilities of the human mind. And the more attentively we observe this phenomenon, the more it reveals about the invisible mechanisms that shape our daily experience. Before continuing on this journey, write a simple but honest sentence in the comments if this resonated with you. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because one of the most widely accepted scientific explanations for déjà vu begins precisely where our confidence is usually greatest: in memory. The memory error theory starts from a simple but powerful idea. The brain, despite being extraordinarily efficient, is not infallible. It organizes information all the time, classifies experiences, creates shortcuts, and files memories based on patterns. And on rare occasions, this system can file incorrectly. Imagine memory as a vast digital archive, with millions of folders being opened, compared, and updated every second. Whenever you experience something new, the brain quickly analyzes that experience and decides where it fits. The problem is that this decision happens in fractions of a second, behind the scenes of consciousness. In déjà vu, something in this process is slightly out of place. A new experience is registered with the label old. Not because it actually happened before, but because some elements of it are too similar to something already experienced. This error is neither gross nor chaotic. It is subtle. It can happen when the brain recognizes a visual pattern similar to another already known, a combination of sounds, a similar spatial arrangement, or even a familiar emotional state. These fragments activate the sensation of recognition before the brain can verify the exact origin of the memory. The result is the illusion of repetition. The feeling of "this has already happened" arises, even without a concrete memory to support it. It's important to understand that memory doesn't function as a faithful recorder of reality. It's reconstructive. Every time you remember something, the brain recreates that experience, mixing facts, emotions, and interpretations. This characteristic is essential for adaptation, decision-making, and transformation throughout life. But it also allows for small deviations. Déjà vu would be one of these deviations, a moment when the recognition system kicks in without the support of a real memory. Some researchers explain this as a duplicate file. The current experience is recorded twice almost simultaneously, once as present perception and again as recent memory. When the second is accessed too quickly, the mind interprets it as something old. Others use the metaphor of swapped folders. The content is new but it was placed in the wrong folder. The brain then reacts with bewilderment because sensation says one thing and logic says another. This internal conflict reveals much about the inner workings of the mind. It shows that the feeling of familiarity depends not only on actual past experiences, but on how the brain organizes information. Familiarity is a signal, not proof. Normally this signal is reliable. But in déjà vu, it triggers without confirmation. And because we are used to trusting this signal, the experience seems profoundly real. The impact of this goes beyond scientific curiosity. When déjà vu happens, it messes with our mindset regarding memory itself. It reminds us that what we call a memory is not a perfect mirror of the past, but a construct. This can be uncomfortable because we like to believe that our memories are solid, stable, and reliable. Déjà vu shatters this illusion for a few seconds and shows us a hidden truth. The brain prioritizes efficiency, not absolute precision. This mechanism plays a fundamental role in survival. Quickly recognizing familiar situations allows for faster reactions, energy conservation, and quicker decision-making. In evolutionary terms, this is extremely advantageous. Memory error, in this context, is not a serious defect, but a rare side effect of a highly adaptable system. The brain prefers to risk an occasional false recognition rather than waste time analyzing every detail of the world as if it were completely new. That's why déjà vu is usually brief. As soon as the conscious mind tries to access the corresponding memory and finds nothing, the sensation begins to dissolve. The brain perceives the inconsistency and moves on. But the emotional impact remains. The experience leaves a mark, a question without an immediate answer. And this question often echoes. If the brain can create a false memory for a few seconds, how much of our everyday perception is also influenced by invisible shortcuts? This reflection directly touches on how we approach our decisions. How often do we rely on a sense of familiarity to choose paths, people, or situations? How often do we follow an intuition based on patterns we don't even consciously perceive? Déjà vu exposes this silent workings and invites us to observe the mind more attentively. It's not just a curious mistake, but a revelation about how we construct meaning throughout our journey. By understanding déjà vu as a memory lapse, the experience ceases to seem supernatural and becomes even more impressive. It becomes proof of how complex the human brain is, capable of creating convincing internal realities from minimal fragments. A machine that learns, anticipates, interprets, and occasionally gets confused. And perhaps it is precisely this imperfection that makes the mind so fascinating. This theory, however, doesn't answer all the questions. It explains the how, but still leaves the why open in certain specific contexts. There are moments when déjà vu seems to happen almost surgically, as if the brain had come very close to something bigger. And that's where other explanations begin to gain ground, further expanding this investigation into memory, perception, and consciousness. Before moving on with this reflection, leave a simple comment below that represents what you've felt so far. This makes sense to me. Top of form. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's an even more intriguing explanation for déjà vu, one that completely changes how we perceive time, our understanding, and even the decisions we make unconsciously. The theory of brain prediction stems from a principle that neuroscience already considers a consensus. The brain doesn't just react to the present. It's constantly trying to predict what will happen in the next instant. While you walk, talk, or observe your surroundings, your brain is working behind the scenes, anticipating movements, sounds, words, and scenarios. It does this to gain efficiency, reduce effort, and increase the chances of quick responses. This ability to anticipate is largely responsible for our survival and also for the feeling of fluidity in reality. The world seems continuous because the brain is always one step ahead. Most of the time, these predictions happen silently and invisibly. You don't realize that the brain bet on what would come next because when the prediction comes true, everything seems normal. But, in very rare moments, this anticipation happens so precisely, and so quickly, that the conscious mind interprets it as if it had already happened before. It's not a memory. It's a prediction that arrived too early. Imagine the brain as a director who mentally rehearses the next scene before it happens. It creates a draft of the immediate future, based on patterns, past experiences, and clues from the environment. When reality fits almost perfectly into this draft, the strange sensation of repetition arises. The mind feels that it has already been experienced because, in a way, it was simulated seconds before. Déjà vu in this context would not be a memory error, but a correct prediction misinterpreted. This idea is unsettling because it challenges our linear notion of time. It suggests that the brain lives in a state of constant pre-visualization of the world. The present you are experiencing now may have been rehearsed moments before without you being aware of it. When this mental preview coincides too closely with what actually happens, the brain becomes conflicted. The sensation says, it already happened, but logic cannot find a corresponding past. This mechanism reveals a hidden truth about the human mind. Much of our conscious experience is constructed after internal decisions have already been made. The brain anticipates, tests internally, and only then delivers the final sensation to consciousness. Déjà vu would be a rare moment in which we can feel this backstage working, as if the curtain were lifted for a few seconds and revealed the internal process of constructing reality. The impact of this goes far beyond scientific curiosity. If the brain is capable of anticipating scenarios with such precision that it confuses prediction with memory, this means that many of our daily choices are also influenced by this system. Intuitions, hunches, and feelings of familiarity can arise from these silent predictions. Déjà vu would simply be the point at which this mechanism becomes visible, almost palpable. This theory also helps explain why déjà vu often occurs in common, seemingly banal situations. It's not major events that trigger it, but moments when the environment offers enough clues for the brain to predict with high accuracy what comes next. A predictable conversation, a familiar route, a logical sequence of actions. When everything fits together too perfectly, the brain can stumble over its own efficiency. There is something profoundly transformative about this idea because it forces us to rethink how we understand control and consciousness. We like to believe that we are always in control, living in the present moment in real time. But déjà vu suggests that the mind operates on multiple temporal layers. While one part lives in the now, another is already a few steps ahead, preparing responses, adjusting expectations, and shaping perception. This constant anticipation is what allows for quick decisions, reading intentions, and adapting to the environment. But it also creates a space where small synchronization failures can occur. When the prediction reaches consciousness too early, the brain interprets that rehearsal as a memory. And the result is that unsettling feeling that time has folded in on itself. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this theory is realizing that déjà vu doesn't point to the past, but to the immediate future. It doesn't say this happened, but reveals that the brain tried to guess what was to come. And it almost got it right. This near coincidence is enough to generate confusion, strangeness, and a strong emotional charge. After all, feeling that the future has already been lived directly affects our mentality about reality, free will, and identity. In this scenario, the brain is not a passive observer but an architect of experience. It constantly constructs hypotheses and adjusts perception as the world responds. Déjà vu would be a rare side effect of this sophisticated architecture. A slight delay or advancement in the alignment between prediction and reality. A moment in which the brain reveals how involved it is in creating what we call the present. And the more we think about it, the clearer it becomes that the experience of déjà vu is not a simple mistake but a clue. A revelation about the inner workings of the mind, about how it transforms stimuli into meaning and constructs the sensation of continuity. It invites us to look at our own mental journey with more curiosity and less absolute certainty. This theory doesn't eliminate the previous one. On the contrary, it expands the scenario. Memory and prediction may be more connected than we imagine, working together in the construction of experience. And when these two forces meet imperfectly, déjà vu arises. A brief but profoundly impactful phenomenon that leaves the feeling that there is still much to be understood about the human brain. Before we delve any further into this reflection, write in the comments a word that represents what this idea sparked in you: curiosity. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because to truly understand déjà vu, it's impossible to ignore the role of the subconscious. There's a huge part of brain function that happens outside the reach of consciousness, far from what we perceive as voluntary thoughts. Even before you perceive a situation, interpret the environment, or make any conscious decision, the brain has already analyzed dozens of stimuli, compared patterns, and prepared possible responses. Déjà vu is born precisely in this invisible territory. The subconscious acts as a silent control center. It receives visual information, sounds, smells, rhythms, facial expressions, body movements, and even micro-details from the environment that go completely unnoticed by the conscious mind. While you believe you are simply living in the moment, this deep layer is already cross-referencing data, recognizing familiar patterns, and evaluating what that means based on past experiences. All of this happens in milliseconds without asking permission. When certain stimuli combine in a specific way, lighting similar to something experienced before, a familiar tone of voice, the arrangement of objects in a space, the subconscious can activate a feeling of recognition before the conscious mind has time to understand the context. The conscious mind arrives later, trying to explain something that has already been felt. And when it doesn't find a clear memory to justify that familiarity, strangeness arises. Déjà vu is often this mismatch between feeling and understanding. This process reveals an uncomfortable truth for many people. We don't have complete control over what we feel. The mentality that we are completely rational and conscious of our decisions falls apart when we realize how much the subconscious influences our experience of the world. Sensations come before explanations. Emotions arise before motives. Déjà vu only exposes this mechanism because it happens intensely and unexpectedly. Behind the scenes of the mind, the brain works with probabilities. It doesn't expect you to consciously analyze everything before reacting. It anticipates, suggests paths, creates quick impressions, and sends signals to the conscious mind to deal with the final result. Most of the time, this system works so well that we don't even notice its existence. But in déjà vu, the mechanism appears. It's as if the brain shows, for a brief moment, that perceived reality is constructed in layers. This perception has a profound impact on how we understand our choices. How many decisions have you made based on a feeling that's hard to explain? How many times has something felt right, or felt familiar, without a clear logical reason? The subconscious actively participates in these decisions, using patterns accumulated throughout life to guide behavior. Déjà vu is just one extreme example of how this influence can manifest. There is also an important emotional component to this process. The brain associates experiences with emotional states very easily. Sometimes, it's not the place or situation itself that triggers the feeling of familiarity, but how you feel at that moment. An emotional state similar to another phase of life can be enough to trigger déjà vu. The subconscious recognizes the emotion before recognizing the context, creating the impression of repetition. This explains why déjà vu can happen in seemingly simple and even irrelevant situations. It doesn't take experiencing something grand for it to arise. The brain simply needs to find a specific combination of stimuli that resonates with past experiences. The sensation appears without warning because the subconscious doesn't need to justify its conclusions. It simply signals. And the conscious mind tries to find the meaning. Realizing this triggers a transformation in how we view our own minds. We understand that consciousness is not the starting point but the destination. It receives information that has already been processed, filtered, and interpreted. Déjà vu is a clear reminder that there is a part of us making decisions, recognizing patterns, and shaping perceptions without us having direct access to this process. This revelation also helps to lessen the fear or confusion surrounding the phenomenon. It's not about something external invading the mind, nor a hidden sign from the universe. It's about the brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, quickly interpreting the world. The error, if we can call it that, lies not in feeling, but in trying to explain a sensation that arose before logic. When we look at déjà vu from this perspective, it ceases to be merely a strange curiosity and becomes an invitation to reflection. An invitation to observe more carefully how thoughts, emotions, and decisions arise. A reminder that the mind's journey is much deeper than we perceive at a conscious level. And that there is a hidden truth operating all the time, shaping our experience without asking permission. This understanding further deepens the mystery, because if the subconscious is capable of creating such a real sensation without us realizing the process, it means that many other everyday experiences are also influenced by these silent behind-the-scenes workings. Déjà vu is just one of the few moments when we can feel this mechanism working outside of the expected rhythm. And the closer we get to this deep layer of the mind, the more questions arise. Questions about control, about identity, and about how much we really know about our own internal processes. This path leads us to reflect not only on memory and prediction, but on how consciousness constructs the sensation of reality from stimuli that never reach our conscious radar. Before continuing with this reflection, write a simple sentence in the comments if this resonated with you. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's a question almost everyone asks after experiencing déjà vu. Why does it feel so real? It's not a vague feeling, it's not a slight doubt, it's not a maybe. Déjà vu comes as an absolute certainty, almost unquestionable. Even when reason screams that it couldn't have happened before, something inside you insists that it did. And this insistence isn't weak. It's intense, convincing, and emotionally charged. This happens because the brain doesn't process truth in the same way that rational logic dictates. For the brain, familiarity is a powerful signal. Throughout evolution, recognizing something as familiar meant safety, predictability, and less risk. What was known tended to be less threatening. Therefore, the brain learned to deeply trust this feeling. When something seems familiar, it doesn't immediately question it. It accepts it. Déjà vu takes advantage of exactly this shortcut. When the feeling of familiarity is activated, the brain automatically associates it with trust. And trust generates certainty. It's not a certainty built on arguments, but a felt certainty. It comes accompanied by a very strong subjective security, as if the whole body agreed with that impression. The problem is that, in déjà vu, this security arises without real foundation. The familiarity appears decoupled from a concrete memory, but the brain reacts as if that memory existed. Emotion plays a central role in all of this. Emotions reinforce perceptions. The more intense the emotion associated with a sensation, the more truthful it seems. Déjà vu is usually accompanied by a slight emotional impact. Surprise, strangeness, curiosity, sometimes even a little discomfort. This impact acts as an amplifier. It tells the brain, this is important. And what is emotionally important tends to be interpreted as true. Another decisive factor is that the brain wasn't designed to doubt its own sensations in real time. Questioning every perception would require an enormous expenditure of energy and make life impractical. Therefore, the mind trusts what it feels first and only then tries to explain it. In the case of déjà vu, the explanation doesn't come, but the sensation has already taken hold. And since the brain doesn't like gaps, it maintains its certainty even without proof. This mechanism reveals something profound about how we construct reality. Truth, for the brain, is not only what can be rationally proven. Truth is what makes sense internally, what fits into existing patterns, and what generates emotional coherence. Déjà vu creates this coherence for a few seconds. Everything seems aligned, familiar, fitting together. And that's enough to deceive the mind itself. There is also the factor of fluidity. During déjà vu, the experience happens without noise, without interruption. There is no immediate conflict, no effort to interpret. Everything flows. And fluidity is another signal that the brain associates with truthfulness. When something flows, it seems right. When it seems right, it seems real. This chain of events is automatic and happens behind the scenes, without consciousness being able to interfere in time. That's why, after the déjà vu passes, there's that strange feeling of, how could I have been so sure? Logic returns, the rational brain takes over again and realizes that there was no basis whatsoever for that conviction. But, during the phenomenon, the illusion is perfect. The brain confused familiarity with truth. And this confusion is more common than we like to admit. It's just laid bare in déjà vu. This perception has a direct impact on how we view our own convictions. How many certainties in everyday life also arise from this same process? Feelings that something is right, wrong, reliable, or dangerous often emerge before any conscious analysis. Déjà vu is just one extreme example of how the mind can create an internal truth without immediate external correspondence. There is something profoundly human in all of this. The brain doesn't seek absolute truth. It seeks enough coherence to move forward. It needs to decide, act, interpret. Familiarity is a powerful tool in this process. When it appears out of context, as in déjà vu, an illusion is formed. But this illusion is not an isolated flaw. It is a reflection of a system that, most of the time, functions brilliantly. What's most fascinating is realizing that déjà vu doesn't just deceive the mind, but the entire body. Posture changes slightly, attention intensifies, the gaze seems to seek confirmation in the environment. The whole organism enters a recognition mode. This further reinforces the feeling of reality. After all, if the body reacts as if it were real, why doubt it? This universal experience creates an immediate connection between people because almost everyone has experienced something similar. It's one of those moments when we realize that, despite individual differences, the basic workings of the human mind follow common patterns. Déjà vu exposes these patterns in a raw, unfiltered way. It shows how emotion, perception, and memory intertwine to construct what we call real experience. And perhaps the most unsettling aspect is understanding that the illusion is not outside, but inside. It is not the world that deceives the brain. It is the brain that, in trying to be efficient, creates a temporary narrative that seems absolutely true. This revelation changes the mindset with which we approach our perceptions and invites us on a more conscious journey of internal observation. The more we reflect on it, the clearer it becomes that déjà vu is just the tip of the iceberg. It indicates that there are other moments when the mind can confuse sensation with reality, familiarity with truth, emotion with certainty. And this realization opens up even deeper questions about how consciousness validates what we feel is real. Before we continue with this reflection, leave a simple comment below that represents this experience for you. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's a shift in perspective that completely transforms how we see déjà vu. Up until now, we've talked about it as an error, a flaw, a mismatch, a short circuit. But what if we're looking at it from the wrong angle? What if déjà vu isn't a brain defect, but quite the opposite? Evidence of its extreme sophistication. The human brain is one of the most efficient structures known. It needs to handle an absurd volume of information every second, filter out irrelevant stimuli, recognize patterns, anticipate dangers, make quick decisions, and still construct a coherent narrative of reality. To cope with all this, it cannot function slowly, analytically, and carefully all the time. It needs to be fast. And to be fast, it needs to predict, generalize, and use shortcuts. In this context, déjà vu begins to seem less like an isolated error and more like a rare side effect of a highly optimized system. A brain that never risked anticipating, recognizing patterns, or generating familiarity would be an insecure, slow, and inefficient brain. The fact that déjà vu exists suggests that the brain is constantly operating at the limit of efficiency, making bets about the world even before we are aware of them. This perspective changes the mindset with which we interpret the phenomenon. Instead of asking what went wrong, we start asking what went right too many times. Déjà vu can be the moment when the brain gets it right too quickly, recognizes patterns with excessive precision, or anticipates the present with such efficiency that it ends up confusing simulation with real experience. It wouldn't be a gross error but an excess of competence. There is something profoundly revealing in this. The human mind was not made to seek absolute truth, but to ensure continuity, adaptation, and survival. It prioritizes coherence, not perfection. If a feeling of familiarity arises, it trusts it because, in the vast majority of cases, this trust is rewarded. Déjà vu would be the occasional price paid for this extremely functional model. This perspective also elevates the discussion to a more philosophical level. It invites us to rethink the idea of normality. Perhaps the strange thing is not the existence of déjà vu, but the fact that it happens so rarely. Considering the volume of predictions, simulations, and reconstructions that the brain makes every instant, it is almost surprising that these conflicts are not more frequent. Déjà vu appears as a small crack in a system that, overall, functions impressively. When we look at it from this angle, déjà vu ceases to be an uncomfortable event and becomes a revelation. A sign that the brain is constantly creating versions of the world, testing internal hypotheses and adjusting perceptions in real time. It doesn't wait for the world to happen before reacting. It anticipates. It builds possibilities. It prepares. And, in rare moments, this preparation becomes visible. This perspective also directly impacts how we understand our decisions. Many choices seem intuitive, almost automatic. We feel something is right before you can explain why. This doesn't happen by chance. It's the same efficiency mechanism that manifests itself in an extreme way in déjà vu. The brain cross-references information accumulated throughout the journey and delivers a quick answer, even without presenting the calculations. In this sense, déjà vu functions as a window into the inner workings of the mind. It shows that we are constantly living in a reality that is internally constructed, negotiated, and adjusted. The feeling of continuity of time, of stability in the world, and of personal identity depends on this silent work. When something is slightly out of rhythm, we feel a sense of strangeness. But this strangeness only exists because there is, beforehand, a highly coordinated functioning. Thinking of déjà vu as sophistication also helps to reduce the fear and excessive strangeness surrounding the phenomenon. It doesn't indicate that something is wrong with you. It doesn't suggest a loss of control or serious cognitive failure. On the contrary, it points to an active, attentive brain that works intensely behind the scenes to keep the experience fluid. A brain that occasionally reveals how involved it is in constructing reality. This shift in perspective brings about a silent transformation in how we relate to our own minds. Instead of distrusting them, we begin to respect their complexity. Instead of seeking mystical or alarming explanations, we start to see déjà vu as an elegant side effect of an incredibly advanced system. A system that is not perfect but precisely for that reason is flexible, adaptable, and creative. There is a subtle beauty in this imperfection. It shows that the mind is not a cold machine, but a living organism, constantly adjusting. Déjà vu doesn't break the brain's logic. It reveals its limits and, at the same time, its extraordinary capabilities. It reminds us that perception is not a passive reflection of the world, but an active process of interpretation. And the more we reflect on it, the clearer it becomes that déjà vu shouldn't be fought or explained simplistically. It should be observed. It invites us to slow down for a few seconds and realize that what we call reality is the result of invisible layers of processing. Layers that make decisions, predictions, and create meaning before we can consciously follow them. This shift in perspective opens up space for a more mature understanding of the human mind. Déjà vu ceases to be merely a strange phenomenon and becomes a powerful reminder of the brain's efficiency. A small sign that we are dealing with a much more sophisticated structure than we normally perceive in our daily lives. And when we accept this, a new question begins to form almost inevitably. If déjà vu reveals so much about efficiency, prediction, and the construction of reality, what else are these silent mechanisms shaping in our perception without us realizing it? Before moving forward with this reflection, write a simple sentence in the comments if this resonated with you. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because after everything that has been explored so far, a question begins to impose itself almost inevitably. If the brain is capable of creating a sensation as intense, convincing, and real as déjà vu without anything having actually happened before, what does this say about the reality we believe we are living all the time? To what extent is what we call real actually a carefully constructed construct of the mind? The experience of déjà vu functions like a crack. A small tear in the curtain that normally separates the external world from internal interpretation. For a few seconds, this separation becomes blurred. Reality doesn't change, the environment doesn't transform, but the sensation changes everything. And this is profoundly revealing. It shows that what we feel as reality depends not only on the facts, but on how the brain organizes, interprets, and validates them internally. The brain doesn't deliver the raw world to consciousness. It delivers an edited, optimized, and coherent version. A version that makes sense within our personal history, our mentality, our memories, and our expectations. Déjà vu arises when this edited version anticipates or clashes with the previous one. When the feeling of truth appears without the necessary external confirmation. And this forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The sensation of reality is, to a large extent, a subjective experience. This finding has a profound impact. It challenges the idea of control, the notion of certainty, and how we trust our own senses. If the brain can generate certainty without an objective basis for a few seconds, it means that other everyday certainties can also arise from invisible internal processes. Decisions, judgments, and convictions often form before reason has time to analyze them. Déjà vu simply makes this process explicit. There is something transformative about this perception. It invites us to adopt a more curious and less rigid stance towards our own experience. Instead of assuming that everything we feel is a faithful reflection of the world, we begin to realize that there is a constant negotiation between external stimuli and internal interpretations. The reality we live is the result of this negotiation. And the brain is the silent mediator of this journey. Déjà vu also raises questions about identity. If the mind is capable of creating such convincing experiences without a clear reference to the past, how much of our personal history is actually a continuous reconstruction? Memories are not fixed records but updated narratives. The feeling of continuity of the self depends on this reconstruction. Déjà vu shows that this continuity can be momentarily simulated, even when it shouldn't exist. This doesn't mean that reality doesn't exist or that everything is an illusion. It means that our access to it is mediated. The brain doesn't lie out of malice. It simplifies, anticipates, and organizes to make the experience possible. Déjà vu is a side effect of this efficiency. A rare moment when the internal process becomes more evident than the final result. This revelation changes how we view consciousness itself. It ceases to be the absolute center of control and becomes a layer of interpretation. A layer that receives information that has already been processed, evaluated, and filtered. Déjà vu happens when this layer receives a signal that is too strong, too early, without the necessary support. And that's why the sensation seems so real, even without explanation. There is also an implicit invitation to cognitive humility. Realizing that the mind can create compelling internal realities reminds us that our perceptions have limits. That what we feel as truth can be influenced by factors beyond our control. This realization does not weaken the human experience. On the contrary, it makes it richer, more complex, and more interesting. What's most fascinating is that déjà vu doesn't offer definitive answers. It leaves questions. It plants doubts. It stimulates reflection. It makes us look inward and question how we construct meaning, how we validate experiences, and how we trust our own sensations. It opens up space for profound conversations about consciousness, time, and reality without needing to resort to mystical or simplistic explanations. When all of this comes together, déjà vu ceases to be merely a strange phenomenon and becomes a mirror. A mirror that reflects the workings of the human mind in all its complexity. A reminder that what we call real is, in part, a story well told by the brain so that we can move forward with coherence and stability. And perhaps the most important question isn't whether déjà vu is a memory error or a prediction gone wrong. Perhaps the real question is what it reveals about how we live, decide, and interpret the world without realizing it. If a feeling can be so real without having happened before, how many other everyday experiences also arise from that same invisible place? This question doesn't need to be resolved now. It can linger, accompanying reflection, maturing over time. Because understanding déjà vu is, fundamentally, understanding a little more about how the mind constructs its own reality. And the closer we get to this understanding, the more we realize that there is still much to be explored in this silent territory between what happens and what we feel happened. If this reflection resonated with you, write a simple sentence in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." If you've made it this far, it's because this topic resonated with you on some level. And when the conversation makes sense, it deserves to continue. Subscribing to the channel is simply a way of saying you want to keep exploring these themes, mind, perception, science, and those silent mysteries that everyone feels but doesn't always understand. That's how this space continues to exist and deepen. If something in this video truly touched you, let me know in the comments. Write a simple sentence just so I know you stayed until the end. It could be, "This message was for me," or, "I'm with you until the end." Sometimes a short sentence says much more than it seems. And if at any point you felt that connection, that insight, or even that pleasant discomfort that prompted reflection, leave a like too. Not as an obligation, but as a sign that this exchange was worthwhile, that this conversation made sense to you as much as it did to me to build all of this. Now, if you want to continue on this journey, there's a video here that complements this topic perfectly. It delves even deeper into these ideas and broadens our perspective on the brain and reality. Click on it and continue reading.